This is the new Sony A7 IV, and these are my first impressions. Alright, so straight out of the box, the first thing you're going to notice is that this thing's a little bit chunkier to hold, and compared to the A7 III, it's a little bit longer here, but more importantly, it's a 1/4 inch longer here on the grip, and that makes a pretty big difference when you hold this for the first time. Personally, I never had any problem with the A7 III, I thought it felt pretty perfect to me, and I've grown accustomed to using the Peak Design clutch anyway, and that's a really great product, so if you don't like this for some reason, check that out, and that'll render this a moot point. So included in the box is the camera body itself, of course. You get one NPFZ 100 battery, and they still didn't make it so that the battery door closes automatically on its own, which I don't like. You gotta still toggle that. You get your USB power adapter, along with provided USB-A to USB-C cable, A7 IV strap. There's still no separate battery charger in the box, so I'm still using this RAV power charger that I found on Amazon. The memory card compartment still in the same location as the A7 III, and I actually had to look up how to open this. I was afraid to break it straight out of the box, even though it's printed right here on the door. It's a two-step motion here. You gotta slide over and then pull down, and then that opens up the latch. Is that more secure? Probably, even though I never had any problem on the A7 III. You still have your dual card slots, except now one of them is a dual format card slot. Oh, and the numbering between slot 1 and slot 2 have changed. You have a greatly improved viewfinder, you have a marginally improved LCD screen. Now, one of the biggest changes we were of course waiting for is the flippy screen. Instead of just a tilty screen on the A7 III, we now have a fully articulating tilty flippy screen. So this is awesome. You can actually close it in on itself so that you're protecting the screen when not in use. Or if you want, you can bring it out, rotate it around, and then put it back into place so that it looks like your old A7 III did. So you have instant access to your buttons. And yeah, it's going to be awesome for getting those weird angle shots, or for filming yourself in public. Oh, and here's another thing to note while we're on the topic of the screen. Your old screen protectors for the A7 III will not fit on the new A7 IV, so you'll have to order new ones. Button arrangement is mostly the same, except now we have this new toggle here to flip between photo and video modes. It's going to take a little bit of time to get used to. And it even has a little detent on the front of the button that you have to push in order to rotate this, so that you don't change modes accidentally while you're shooting. And while you still have the scroll wheels here that I traditionally use for shutter speed, you have one here I traditionally use for aperture. Here on the A7 III, you used to have a scroll wheel that was dedicated to exposure compensation, but now on the A7 IV, this is a custom wheel, and you can configure this to control whatever you want, and it actually has a locking button on the top, so if you want to change it, you unlock it, change it as desired, and then you can lock it back into place. And this, if you remember on the A7 III, you're probably always accidentally hitting this and moving it to where you don't want it to be, so that's a nice feature. One other small thing I've noticed, all the buttons are a little bit bigger from what I can tell, and they have a lot more travel to them compared to the A7 III. There's a little bit of play here, where I feel like the A7 III was a much more solid feeling button, if that makes any sense. It's not a big deal, just something to get used to. Moving along to the side with all the ports on it, we now have actual opening and closing doors instead of those little latches that were always kind of dangling. So that's a lot nicer. Felt like those things were always getting in the way of each other, so that's a much appreciated improvement. Alright, with the initial review of the camera body itself out of the way, let's take it out and shoot. And it just so happens to be one of those rare sunny winter days out here in Seattle, so let's take advantage of it. People probably think that I'm casing their house. I'm always sitting in front of their house. It's the only clear shot of the mountain though. It's one sunny day out of like 100 maybe. Alright, so the question on a lot of people's minds probably is, should I upgrade to the A7 IV? If you're coming from an APS-C camera and you're looking to upgrade to full frame for the first time, then absolutely 100% A7 IV is the way to go. Now, if you're looking for a camera with a more affordable price point, then the A7 III is still a fantastic camera. In fact, it's what I'm recording on right now, since I'm kind of reviewing this one. And now that this is out, you're probably going to start to find some good deals on it. But what about if you're coming from an A7 III? Well, the A7 III is still a fantastic camera, and if it still checks off all the boxes for you, then you might not need to go to this right away. But if you're really looking for that extra usability, you want the touchscreen, you're tired of that menu system on the A7 III, or maybe you want improved video quality with 10-bit recording. Or perhaps you're looking into getting into printing and you want the higher sensor resolution, which is primarily why I got this camera. Or maybe you want the ability to crop in a little bit more on your images and still have usable resolution. Or you want more usable images in cropped sensor mode, then you'll get that with the A7 IV. So far, there are two things that I'm watching out for with this camera. One is that every now and then it seems like the camera can't figure out if I'm looking through the viewfinder or if I flipped back to the LCD screen. So I don't know if that's a software bug or if that's a setting that I've missed someplace. The second thing is the power consumption. If you go onto Sony's website and you look at the specs of the A7 III versus the A7 IV, then the A7 IV specs are showing a higher power consumption, basically to do anything, whether you're browsing through photos, you're just looking through the viewfinder, or if you're filming video. So I expect to get less battery life out of the A7 IV, but that remains to be seen as I use the camera. And maybe in the meantime, just bring along some extra batteries with you. Oh, and one last thing before I forget, shout out to the Shutterbug. That's a local camera shop here in the Pacific Northwest area. They hooked me up with a slot to pre-order the A7 IV, and they made sure that it got to my house safely. And it's a nice, friendly camera shop to work with, so I recommend checking them out. Now, maybe I've convinced you to upgrade, but you want to wait until you get a deal on this camera. Well, unfortunately, since it was just released, it's probably going to be a while before we see any major discounts on it. But what I can offer you is a good credit card deal that I found. It's the Citi Custom Cash credit card. And now on the Citi application itself, it says you'll get $200 cash back after spending $1,000, which this purchase, of course, qualifies for. However, if you sign up through Credit Karma, then the offer is $300. And I think it's actually a decent card to have in your wallet in general. It gives you 5% back on your highest spend category each month, which could be something like gas stations or grocery stores. And on top of that, you'll get 1% back on all of your purchases. You'll get no interest for up to 15 months, so you can put more money into stocks and crypto. So if any of that sounds interesting, I'll leave a few links below and you can check that out. Alright, so that's about all I have for now. I hope that this video was useful. If you have any questions about the A7 IV or how it compares to the A7 III, then drop a question down in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer it. And of course, let me know if you're switching to the A7 IV yourself. Alright, I'll see you in the next video.